Hello, other people out there in the world. Welcome to the Rybrary. I am your librarian. No talking in the Rybrary, please. Hope you all had a great holiday season thing. It is now 2026, because that is what happens when you get to the end of December and then you come to the beginning of January. That means it's a new year, and the old one was 2025. So this year that we're in right now is 2026. You will need to know all this for the test later, so please write it down. Today, we're going to go over 26 books that I would like to read in 2026. I saw a lot of people doing this video, and I am shameless with stealing video ideas from other people. I liked the idea quite a bit of, just coming up with a list of the 26 of the books that I'm planning on reading this year and sharing it with y'all. So that's what we're doing here. So no use beating around the bush. Let's get right into it. First book that I have here, and these are in no particular order, just how I, grab them. The first book here I have is Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay, a 1967 novel that got turned into a film by Peter Weir in the 70s, who would go on to direct other things like American Beauty. I saw the movie and really liked it a lot. It's very, it's not horror exactly, but it's mysterious and mystical, and like teases in the direction that a lot of modern horror movies are kind of doing, like A24 elevated horror movie type things. This has some of those vibes. The movie does, at least. And I'm looking forward to reading the source material. It is about a girls' school in the early 1900s in Australia. Like a bunch of girls from the school go on a picnic and vanish, and it's about the aftermath of that disappearance and trying to figure out what happened, but more just about like the effects that it has on the community and that kind of thing. So yeah, cool movie, and very much looking forward to checking this out. Next one I have here is Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. This is, I guess, sort of horror, sort of thriller book from the 70s, I believe. And this is the first book in a series that V.C. Andrews would go on to continue. And then once she died, other people, wrote under her name to continue this series. And I think it's about like a crazy grandmother kind of like locks her grandchildren in an attic and for like inheritance reasons or something. And, they, start to kind of go crazy being trapped in this attic and then do weird things. I think that's what it's about. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, this looks really fun, and I hear it's kind of, trashy, and so that sounds appealing to me. The third book I have here for you all is To Ride Hell's Chasm by Janny Wirtz, a fantasy author of, some renown, not super, super well known, but, within the world of fantasy, definitely has her advocates. I'm interested to read this, one, to get a sense of Janny Wirtz's writing and whether I want to pursue her works more. And also because it's a standalone, which is, relatively rare for fantasy. I'm more interested in checking out fantasy books that are not series, because, it's hard to get invested in like a bunch of, 8-10 book long series that are, all long books. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what this is about, but I think it's, relatively conventional fantasy fare, but I've heard her prose is really great, and that is enough to get me in the door. The next book that I have here is not one that I own yet, but I'm planning on picking up at some point this year, and that's Blind Sight by Peter Watts. And this is a sci-fi horror book, and in recent months, as I've been exploring more and more of what's out there in terms of genre fiction, there's actually like not as much as you would think that is categorized as sci-fi horror. You hear about sci-fi books with some horror elements and vice versa, but rarely do you find, one that is categorized as sort of a hybrid of the two. And if please, if you have any suggestions for this or recommendations, please, let me know in the comments, because I'm super interested in this intersection. But yeah, the one that does come up quite a bit that when you look around is Blind Sight by Peter Watts. I don't really know what it's about. I don't really care to. I try to pick and choose where I read about something in advance, in terms of, the blurb or whatever, and when I, go in blind. And the blind sight. So perhaps I'll go in blind to blind sight. There you go. There you go. Next up, on the books that I want to read in 2026, is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty, the classic horror novel about possession that got turned into the classic horror film. This is one I'm particularly excited for. It's apparently like more horrific in some ways than the movie, more disturbing. And I guess it sort of, dives into the nature of exorcisms at this period in history in like the 60s or 70s, and the way the church justified it with pseudoscience and that kind of thing, and that is really interesting to me. That's obviously stuff they didn't really go into too much in the movie, and I would like to learn about that stuff in addition to reading this classic book. Next up, we have Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, the second book in her Realm of the Elderlings series, and the Farseer trilogy within that series, which is chronologically the first trilogy. I keep meaning to get around to this, and other things keep coming in the way. Like, this will probably get read pretty soon, because I am really interested in getting deeper into the story and the world. This is a series about a royal bastard in a fantasy world who finds a place in his royal house as an assassin. Yeah, I would like to get this, and I have also the third one in the series, Assassin's Quest, on my shelf here, and I would like to get those both read this year, ideally, but at the very, very least, Royal Assassin is getting read this year. Next up, we have The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. This is a horror novel that was published in the 70s, I believe. I guess it's about a auctioneer who comes to this small town and begins getting people to auction off their possessions, and then gradually more and more of their stuff and of their freedom, I guess. I like corruption as a general concept in horror novels, and horror media in general. And corruption of like a small town is something that's always an interesting thing. Ramsey Campbell's Hungry Moon was a good example of this that I read recently that I loved. But yeah, it seems like that kind of thing is what's going on here, and I'm really excited to get into it. It's apparently kind of a slow burn also, which is totally fine by me. Next up that I have here that I also don't have a physical copy of yet is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, the source material for one of the most popular movies ever made. And obviously a huge bestseller. I am particularly excited to check this out because, I am a fan of the movie, certainly. I grew up with it. But the book is apparently fairly different in its like tone. It's like more of a horror book, I guess, than the movie is. And the movie you can kind of look at as a horror movie if, from a certain angle. But yeah, excited to check out this classic and see if, I like it even more than the movie. Next up, we have one, possibly two books, depending on how you count this. This is Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe, which is actually the two first books in his Book of the New Sun series, the 4-book series. That is a classic of fantasy and science fiction. It's kind of a mixture of both. The first book is called Shadow of the Torturer, and the second book is called Claw of the Conciliator, hence Shadow and Claw. I don't know if I'm going to read both of them, back to back. I'll have to see. It's, they don't look super long, but I have heard that this is fairly challenging, and that there's very little hand-holding in terms of like explaining what's going on, and you have to kind of piece things together yourself, which can be very intriguing and can be very fun, but also can be very irritating depending on what the thing is in question and how well it's executed. I think there's a good chance I'll really enjoy this. And 4 books for a fantasy sort of series is not that long, especially when this is 2 of them. That's another one that I think will happen pretty early in the year. Next up here we have Emma by Jane Austen. Yeah, I've never read any Jane Austen or anything like remotely in this ballpark. I don't tend to read classics too much, and I definitely haven't read this kind of classic ever. I don't actually really even know what this is about. This was apparently published in 1816, which was frankly significantly earlier than I thought that Jane Austen was writing. That goes to show you how little I know. Yeah, I do want to try a little harder with classics this year because, if people are still reading this book, 200 plus years after it came out, and enjoying it, then there's probably got to be something pretty good about it. I think I'm holding out hope that this is going to be really cool, and maybe will open the door to reading more Jane Austen in the future. Next book here that I want to read this year is Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey, the third book in the Expanse series that has sort of been very popular over the last decade, partly due to its television adaptation. I've been really interested to get to this one in particular because the part of the show that covers this book is very short. It's like half a season as opposed to the first two books, which take up a season and a half each. So this is probably going to be a lot more fleshed out than the events that are in the adaptation. And, the story does start to get really interesting in certain ways at this point. I won't say anything so as to not spoil it, but, certain things start to unfold at this point in the series. Next up here is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, the modern classic of dystopian fiction about a world where women become subservient to men again after a political revolution following a period of incredibly decreased fertility. I've seen a good chunk of the television adaptation of this. I feel like that's my constant refrain with a lot of these books, is that I've seen the adaptation and I want to check out the source material. I'm sure that's true of a lot of people. I'll be partly reading this to fulfill a requirement for the our fantasy book bingo challenge that I'm doing currently. And the prompt that this is fulfilling is read a book where clothing or fiber arts is important. And the handmaids in this book, as well as everyone else, have very strict dress codes and very distinctive kind of looks to them. Now we have The Wastelands, book number 3 in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, about the gunslinger Roland's journey to the titular Dark Tower. This is a really interesting series to read because it seems to vary quite a bit from book to book in terms of like tone and genre and all kinds of stuff. And people also seem to have very, very different opinions about all of the books. Some people I see are like, oh, this one is great and this one is trash, and all of them are good except this one, which is, terrible. People really seem to have wildly differing opinions about this series, but I found the first two books both very compelling in spite of them being fairly different. Next up, we have one of my favorite modern horror authors, a modern master of cosmic horror, and that's Laird Barron, and his, I believe, second short story collection called Occultation and Other Stories. I have read one of the stories in here already in a different collection called The Broadsword. It's a great story. I'm looking forward to rereading it. This also apparently includes an introduction by Michael Shea, another cosmic horror author that I'm a fan of. And I mentioned both of these authors in my 5 Lovecraftian authors who are not Lovecraft video a couple months back, so you can go check that out if you want. Next up is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, the second book in his Kingkiller Chronicle, and this was published in 2011, and fans have been waiting for the third and final book in this trilogy since then. An epic fantasy book, but it's amazingly well written, gorgeous prose. I didn't love every element of it, but his writing is so wonderful. I keep almost picking this up and then being like, well, who knows when that third book is even coming out? So, maybe I'll just schedule it for a bit later so that, maybe I'll read it a little bit before the new one comes out. But who knows when that'll ever actually happen. The next one is not actually a book per se. It's actually sort of like a zine. This is called Thank You for Joining the Algorithm. This is put out by Tenebris Press, a small indie horror publisher that I like. And the stories and art in here are, all about tech-oriented horror and that kind of thing, which is very interesting to me. I haven't mentioned it too much here on the channel, but I'm an aspiring horror author myself. And, when I think about the things that scare me in life, in the modern world, a lot of that has to do with technology and, the way it's going to reshape everything and already has reshaped everything in not all great ways. And so, that seems like an authentic place to write from. And so, reading more stuff in this ballpark is definitely high on my agenda. Next up is a science fiction classic by Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. Yeah, this seems like, for a fan of science fiction, this just seems like one of those ones that you have to read at some point. It's, I guess, arguably Heinlein's most famous novel. He also wrote Starship Troopers and other stuff. Yeah, I mean, if you've watched videos here before, you'll know that I'm interested in exploring more classic sci-fi and seeing like how much of it is for me. So far, it's mixed results, but I'm sure that I'll find some really cool stuff in this exploration, and Heinlein is as good of a place to go as any. Now we have Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, famous and influential author of literary fiction. I have yet to read any of his books. This will be the first one, and this is also one that doesn't have an adaptation. So I'm interested in reading it for that reason, because I've seen film adaptations of a couple of his other works, No Country for Old Men and The Road. And those are both, good, and I want to read those at some point. But in terms of like my first experience with Cormac McCarthy, I think it would be cool to just get a story that is, his and that I have no preconceptions about. This is apparently very violent and very bleak, but very beautiful. And, sounds great to me. I love all of those things together. And I guess it's like a Western of sorts, and has a very terrifying, judge character. So all of that sounds very appealing to me. So I'm really excited to check this one out. Next up on my list of 26 books that I want to read in 2026 is Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. If you've watched videos of mine, you'll know that I have something of an interest in extreme horror. In terms of looking at the modern popular extreme horror books out there, this is one that kind of constantly gets mentioned as being, a good book. In addition to just being an extreme horror book with crazy, terrifying, awful stuff, it's, a good book. That's what, people pretty much unanimously say about this book. Unanimously for extreme horror. Obviously, lots of people are gonna hate this kind of thing. This is apparently about a young woman who, develops an obsession with an imprisoned serial killer, and then they, sort of form a relationship, with him in prison, and, he asks her to do something for him, on the outside, and it, apparently gets to be very surreal and nightmarish, and like this like folklore stuff in here. This all sounds very, very appealing to me. This mixture of things sounds like something I would find very interesting. So I definitely would like to read this book this year. Next up, we have a book by an author that I've become really enamored with over the last year, and that is Nick Cutter. And that book is The Queen, his most recent novel. Yeah, I read The Troop and The Deep by him last year and absolutely loved them both. And so I have anticipation going into this, because a third, knockout would be, cement him as, an all-time great for me, I think. I don't super know what this is about. The description on the inside is sort of vague, and I don't really care to look too much into it, to be honest. I'd like to go into this fairly blind. I do know that it has to do with bees in some sense, and there's actually like a part of The Deep that has to do with bees and has some really great body horror stuff having to do with bees. And so I think it would be cool if maybe like some of that kind of stuff made its way into here as well. But yeah, I'm going to take this opportunity again to sing the praises of Nick Cutter, because he just hits such a sweet spot for me with horror, like with just the right amount of gore and violence and the right amount of conceptual nightmarish stuff, and he just is an author for me, I think, and I really hope that I can confirm that impression with this here book. The next up is a book that I don't know a huge amount about, but the mix of genres that it seems to sort of contain is interesting to me, and that book is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I think that this is like sort of sci-fi, sort of dystopian, sort of, or not dystopian, post-apocalyptic, and sort of horror. Sounds pretty mysterious, which sounds cool to me. Part of the reason that I'm looking forward to this is because a lot of booktubers and other people whose views I respect with regards to books, like love the hell out of this thing. Next up is a super popular book that I'm probably going to be reading very soon, and that book is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman. The huge book that has become sort of the face of lit RPG and the thing that is kind of pushing it into the mainstream. I have no experience with lit RPG, and this will be my first kind of exposure to that. It's a genre of books that, incorporates a bunch of elements of video games and gaming in general. And I'm interested to see what that's like, even if this particular thing doesn't seem like it'll necessarily be my favorite thing. It seems like it'll be a lot of fun to read, but not something that I will necessarily fall in love with. I can't quite explain it other than to say that I can kind of tell with certain things if I'm going to, fall in love with it or not. And I don't think that's going to be the case with this, but I am going to read it. I'm reading it as part of a book club, and I hope I love it. I really do. And it's just the beginning of a series of, I think, the last one, I think the 8th one, then the last one is coming out this year. Next up is another one that like keeps getting pushed back from other things, and I'm a mood reader, so I just got to kind of go where my heart is telling me to go at the current moment. But this is one I keep meaning to get to, and it's Hyperion by Dan Simmons, a modern sci-fi classic that was published, I think, in 1990. This is a sci-fi sort of retelling of the Canterbury Tales, which, I don't know what that means because I don't really know much about the Canterbury Tales, but maybe this will get me interested in checking it out if I like it a lot. This is apparently the story of 6 pilgrims who are traveling to this planet Hyperion to visit this thing called the Shrike, I think. Telling their stories and why they're going to this planet, and that has some sort of like religious significance, I think. That sounds very cool and appealing to me. I like religious stuff in the context of sci-fi. This is also the beginning of a series, though I've heard mixed things about the rest of the series. But who knows? Maybe I'll love it. I hope I love it. This one seems like something that would be a slam dunk for me. Another sci-fi classic is next, and that is Neuromancer by William Gibson, which was originally published in 1984, I believe. This is known as sort of one of the progenitors of the cyberpunk style subgenre, whatever, and has to do with hacking into computer systems in the future and that kind of thing. It sounds like it could be cool for sure. I've also heard that it can be kind of difficult for some people. I think it could probably go either way for me. This is another one that I'm reading for the Our Fantasy Book Bingo Challenge, and that's to fulfill the prompt of read a book where that involves piracy, and apparently this involves some kind of tech piracy or something. All right, we only have 2 more. The next one is Corpse Mouth and Other Autobiographies, a short story collection from John Langan. I recently read his book, The Fisherman, and that was my 3rd favorite read of 2025. I absolutely loved it. A wonderful balance of literary versus not literary horror, and introduced a sort of cosmic horror mythos that was very interesting and unique in my eyes, and I guess it is explored more in his short fiction. Yeah, I can't sing Langan's praises enough. The Fisherman is really wonderful. And finally, my guy, Adrian Tchaikovsky, and his 2025 novel, Shroud. This is another one I wanted to get to last year, but just didn't have time, and is very high on my agenda for this year. This seems to be a little bit horror leaning. I mean, it's a sci-fi novel, but it seems to, be a little bit horror leaning, and also seems to include an element that I love in his work, where, the aliens and the alien life forms and that kind of thing feel very different and unique, feel very alien. And I really appreciate his ability to, create those kinds of races and entities and that kind of thing. And you know, he's just one of my favorites from recent years. And I you know, I'm always excited to read a new Tchaikovsky book. So there we are, 26 books that I would like to read in 2026. I hope you enjoyed this list. Please let me know in the comments what you're planning on reading this year, or if you're planning on reading any of these books. Please like and subscribe. I would appreciate it. Thank you, as always, for visiting the Rybrary, and you may now talk.